Hey there. So in this video, I'm going to teach you about the targeted ketogenic diet and how high-performance athletes like TJ Dillashaw use it to lose weight and perform as best they can. So, in case you don't know about the UFC, TJ Dillashaw is the 135-pound champion. That's the bantamweight weight class, and he recently cut down to 125 pounds for a fight. So, he lost that fight, but there's some speculation that it was stopped a little too early. But the one thing I am certain on is that this guy used a targeted ketogenic diet for his prep and for his training camp. He's praised the ketogenic diet in the past, and I totally understand why, because high-performance athletes can totally benefit from keto approaches more so than carb-based approaches when they're cutting weight. You know, typically a lot of athletes will use carb-based approaches, but they won't give themselves enough carbs, and they're basically selling themselves short on energy because they're not quite pushing the fat loss levels of ketosis, but they're also not giving themselves enough energy to really enjoy a carb-based metabolism. So when it comes to high-performance athletes on targeted ketogenic diets, TJ Dillashaw is a perfect example. And he likes to keep his nutrition kind of secretive and doesn't really want to reveal everything, but I'm pretty sure I know exactly how this guy does his diet. And I dug up on the internet a sort of vague meal plan of what he actually eats. So before I get into that, I'm just going to plug my keto series on professional athletes and famous people and how they use the ketogenic diet. And TJ Dillashaw is a great example for the targeted ketogenic diet. So what he says is for lunch, actually before I get into his lunch, I'm going to tell you what he says about the ketogenic diet. So he says for the ketogenic diet, it has done great things for me lately and my energy is through the roof. So that's a pretty good quote. But he also says, I try to keep my body in ketosis, but for how hard I work out, I'm still able to eat some carbs. So right away when I read that, the indicator in my head that went off was this guy does targeted ketogenic diet. And that makes total sense, like I said, because he's a high-performance athlete. Typically, high-performance athletes prefer to do ketosis with some carbohydrates around their workout times, which is the gist of a TKD, targeted ketogenic diet. But for those of you who don't know what that means, it's basically you get in ketosis, right? And then after some time, once you have your workouts that are very high intensity, you're going to start incorporating around 25 to 50 grams of carbs right before the workout. You're not going to be eating any fats with those carbs, and it's best to get them from dextrose or glucose, not fructose, which is the sugar from fruit. However, TJ Dillashaw is a little unique case, and he, from what I think, gets some of this from the fruits. So TKDs are useful for maintaining your muscle mass during cut, kind of pushing past the plateau point of a cut, because you know, you might not be able to, will be able to burn more calories by incorporating those carbs before a workout and then doing a really high intensity exercise session. And because of that, even though you've incorporated the carbs, the exercise you might have done may push you past the caloric deficit. You might need to lose more fat. So TJ Dillashaw has been using the ketogenic diet for many of his preps because he's praised it for at least 2 years now. But the TKD is definitely what I think he was using for his most recent fight, and he's definitely been experimenting with keto diets for a while. So when it comes to what he actually eats, he says he's a big fan of fasting. He does that with keto, which goes hand in hand. I've made other videos on that as well, and I'm going to make more videos on it. But he says, for lunch I'll do a salad with lots of greens, spinach, boiled egg, and chicken. I'll have some sort of fish or clean protein for dinner. Since I'm not eating carbs and bread, pasta, or rice, the amount of vegetables I'm eating these days is unreal. I also have a very high-fat, high-protein diet. So right away when I heard high-fat, high-protein diet, I knew this guy's trainer knows what he's doing. Because typically people who recommend ketogenic diets, or people who jump on the train of ketogenic diets, recommend a high-fat, low-protein approach. And that really isn't optimal, especially not for fat loss. And I'll explain. For fat loss, you don't necessarily need high ketones, you don't necessarily need low protein. And protein is still going to be sustainable, it's still going to be a large role in sustaining your muscle mass. However, all the high-fat, low-protein approaches are based off of 1920s, 1930s studies on children with epilepsy who need really high ketones in order to avoid having seizures. You know, if your goal is weight loss, you don't need to have really high ketones. The only time you need really high ketones and a 80-20 fat to protein diet is if you're trying to avoid seizures, because that's a pretty big deal. So high fat, high protein, that implies some sort of balance between the two. Definitely a good approach, especially for a high performance athlete. He also says, I usually do 3 meals and 3 snacks. That's just the way he likes to structure it. I eat organic, stay away from grains, sugars, and processed foods. In the morning, I'll have an omelet with broccoli, spinach, cheese, and ham. I actually do that too. I'll also have some fruit and drink a cold pressed juice. Snacks are usually Muscle Farm protein bars and some nuts. Now, if you follow the keto diet, the fruits and juice probably set off the carb alarm in your head and made you think, okay, that doesn't sound like it fits. Now, it kind of doesn't because, like I said before, the whole fructose thing, where it's not the most optimal to have on a TKD. That's because fructose will replenish your liver glycogen rather than dextrose or glucose, which is produce the type of sugar in your body which will go right to your muscles. And basically, when you are doing a TKD, you want those carbs to be in your body and out of your body by the time you're done training. So for a guy like TJ Dillashaw, yeah, he can probably get away with some fruits and some fructose because even if he does store a little extra liver glycogen, the amount of activity he does on a daily basis probably uses that up anyways. But he also sent a picture of, some supplements he has, which I'll show you right here because I'm not going to edit that into the video because it'd take too much time. So there you go, those are some supplements. Basically, to summarize that for you, they're mainly food replacements. So he has some cognac rice, some cognac pasta, which is a C grain. It's basically all fiber and very low calories. It's a good meal replacement it's a good little snack on keto. He also has some nuts, a large variety of exotic nuts, walnuts, high fat, high protein snacks, which definitely goes hand in hand with that whole high fat, high protein approach that I just mentioned. So this guy's body fat levels drop so much that it looks like he's actually like 0% body fat. I mean, obviously he's not 0% body fat because that's pretty much impossible, but he's definitely pushing it. A lot of bodybuilders don't even really push that sort of level of body fat. And for me, my whole passion revolves a lot around of course, keto dieting and nutrition, but the bodybuilding side of things as well. So, as I mentioned before, the TKD could be a good tool to push you past a plateau because of the amount of calorie burn you can produce out of it. But ketogenic diets in general are still optimal for athletes because once you're fat adapted, right, even though it takes a little longer to reach that point, you're still going to be able to perform very well and at very high levels. I do that myself, but there have been times where I've done a TKD and incorporated some carbs around my exercise. One of the other benefits you're going to get from a TKD is basically you don't have to do it all the time. You can do a ketogenic diet for a large amount of the cutting phase, and then let's say if you have a very, important sports game or something like that, you can drop the carbs right, just before that game if you'd like, right, for an extra boost, right? You kind of want to look at carbs like a supplement on a TKD because that's what they are. You're going to be supplementing with them for energy. You're not really consuming them for taste or for nutritional value. You're consuming them for just the energy burst they're going to give you and the activities they're going to allow you to do at certain levels, especially if you're not fully fat adapted. So you're going to want to have those from dextrose or glucose predominantly. For me, I like cream of wheat. That's my favorite source. However, you can get dextrose supplements, which are, pretty good as well because you can be very precise with them. And speaking of precision, a lot of people tend to, there's a kind of rule of thumb that's a little bit of a myth, I guess, where they say you should have about 1 gram per each minute of activity you're going to be doing. However, most people tend to get by anywhere around that 50 gram mark. So you can push it a little bit past, but you don't want to push too far. I wouldn't really say past 100 grams. That's kind of pushing the ceiling a little too much. As far as the TKD and how it affects your blood sugars, your insulin sensitivity is going to be very high when you're on a keto diet. if you're not eating carbs, your sensitivity to insulin, which carries those carbs and puts them into your muscles and puts the proteins in your muscles as well, your sensitivity is going to be higher because you're not eating carbs. Especially when you're doing high intensity activity, that's also going to increase your insulin sensitivity. And TKD is kind of like if you're going to try to walk the tightrope of trying to build muscle and lose fat at the same time, TKD might be a decent approach, at least the most optimal approach for it, one of them, because as much as I don't necessarily advise you to do that sort of plan where you're trying to build and cut at the same time, the insulin responses you're going to have from while you're on a TKD, if you have those carbs with a protein source, it's going to get those proteins into your muscles a little quicker too, due to the increased insulin sensitivity and due to the way that protein and carbs will be taken in your body when you're doing a TKD. So flushing those proteins and carbs into your muscle at the same time is going to be beneficial for muscle gain and, in the net view of things, fat loss. So if you're going to try to go for that route, which as much as I don't necessarily recommend it, TKD might be useful compared to other approaches. Now, TKD itself, it's not necessarily something you have to do. I like doing the high fat approach, the fat adapted approach, and I keep my proteins probably just as high as TJ Dillashaw does on a percent level. High fat, high protein is very optimal for athletes, and all I can really say about TJ Dillashaw's approach is he clearly knows what he's doing. Well, his trainer does at least, and it really leaned him down, and it looks like he kept all of his muscle. So as far as the outsider perspective looks, TKD seemed to be a pretty big success for the goal that TJ Dillashaw had in mind, which was leaning down, keeping that muscle, feeling good during training, not feeling like shit, and performing good and enjoying training. That's the main goal. So if you would like me to talk about any other famous people, athletes, their keto diets, as long as you're certain that somebody's done one, I would be happy to break that down, do some research on it, do some digging on it, and I'd love to answer any other keto questions or concerns you have, and bodybuilding related concerns or other performance related concerns with low carb dieting and nutrition, and basically anything keto related. So if you like this video, let me know, leave a comment, and subscribe to my stuff if you like this type of thing. My name is Anthony Romano. Peace.